interpretation options in the menu on the bottom of your screen. Today's session is the sixth of the 6 webinars of the 3rd season of the UNESCO-UNFCCC Webinar Series on Climate Education for Social Transformation. As you may know, in 2022, UNESCO and UNFCCC held 8 conversations on the road to COP27 focused on greening education policy and curriculum, while in 2023, last year, the second series of webinars focused on greening schools on the road to COP28. And as part of the contribution to the Pillar 3 of the Greening Education Partnership, the 3rd series of the 6 conversations we had this year since May focused on the topic of greening teacher training and education systems capacities. On the road to COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, each episode delved into the challenges at all levels of education, including early childhood, primary, secondary, and tertiary, from the diverse perspectives of teachers, educators, young people, and policymakers, as well as explore concrete solutions to greening teacher training and education systems capacities in order to deliver quality climate change education for social transformation. So today's conversation, titled What's Next for Greening Teacher Training and Education Systems Capacities, continues the series of discussions on addressing the challenges and solutions to climate change education. It reflects on the main achievements and insights from COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, where greening education was a focal point of the Baku Initiative on Human Development for Climate Resilience. And of course, the UNFCCC's Action for Climate Empowerment agenda. Particularly at this COP, we had the 2 main events organized on greening education. First, the high-level session at COP29, which delved into the overall work on Baku Initiative on Human Development for Climate Resilience, which included the components of education, jobs and just transition, health, and children and youth. And also on the same day, on 18th of November, the Greening Education Partnership held the 2nd annual meeting, which was part of the Ministerial Roundtable on Greening Education, and particularly also with a focus on climate literacy and assessment through international assessment frameworks such as PISA. So building upon these conversations, as well as many side events and activities held around COP29, we would like to particularly focus today's discussion on teachers' elements, particularly for strengthening teacher training and education systems capacities. And this was highlighted in Baku Guiding Principles on Human Development for Climate Resilience. As you can see on the screen, among the 12 principles outlined in Baku at COP29, Principle 3 and 4 on investing in integrating quality climate education and building climate resilient and low carbon education systems were among the commitments discussed during this day. So now today's discussion will explore how these outcomes can drive actionable strategies to enhance teacher training and strengthen education systems capacities for climate resilience. And this discussion will be guided by 2 key questions. First, what are the main achievements and takeaways on greening teacher training and education systems capacities from COP29? So some of you had been already in Baku in person, and some of you may have followed the discussions from your home. And so this will be an opportunity to delve into the key achievements and takeaways from this conversation in Baku. The second question is, what are the next steps to translate these achievements and takeaways into action? So what do we take away home in our own respective areas, particularly on the topic of teacher training and education systems capacities to take into action to strengthen climate education? So the discussion will start with the interviews with panelists, followed by moderated question and answer. So before we begin the panel discussion, I would like to introduce you that we will be using during the session as always to engage everybody joining via Zoom and YouTube. So you can go to slido.com, and enter the event code 01203 as shown on the screen. And you can also scan the QR code on the screen with your mobile phone and follow the link to the browser. This tool will serve two purposes. First, to allow you to raise questions throughout the session, which will be addressed during the question and answer segment to the extent possible. So you can see on the app that there is a question and answer segment that you can use. And the second, to engage you directly for input later in the webinar using the questions raised in this slideshow. So now, without further ado, I have the pleasure of introducing today's three panelists who will share their views on this topic. First, Mr. Mario Piacentini, the Senior Analyst at OECD. Mario is a Senior Analyst in the Program for International Student Assessment, PISA, at the OECD. He's an expert in measurement and leads the work on PISA Innovative Assessment and PISA Research and Development Program. He works with international experts to design assessments for 21st century competencies, and his project aims to expand the metrics we use to define successful education systems. Second, we have Ms. Gurpreet Kaur, teacher from Temonyong Primary School in Langkawi, Malaysia. Gurpreet has been a teacher for the past 12 years and was one of the teachers who joined the COP29 youth camp organized by the COP29 Presidency Youth Climate Champion, along with UNFCCC, UNESCO, and other partners of the Greening Education Partnership. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Colin Matthew, Executive Officer from Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation of Canada. And Colin started teaching at secondary level in 2003, and since 2014, he has been active in the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, including on the Environmental Advisory Work Group of the Federation. Colin also sits on the Environmental Advisory Working Group of the Ontario Federation of Labour and Canadian Labour Congress. So thank you all for joining us today, and we're very excited to start this conversation with you on this very important topic, wrapping up the achievements from COP29. So let's first start with the first question. What are the main achievements and takeaways on greening teacher training and education systems capacities from COP29? So we've earlier seen the overview of the discussions around the human development question, and also looked into how the greening education topic had been addressed at COP29. So to reflect on this question together, I would like to invite everybody joining this session to please go to slido.com and enter the event code #01203 and share your views on the question. You can also scan the QR code shown on the screen and open the link in your browser, and you can give your answers in short words. Now, the question is, what are the key achievements and takeaways on greening teacher training and education systems capacities from COP29, as you have observed during the past weeks? So please use this web platform to share your views on what would be the key takeaways to take forward. Thank you very much for your input. Now we have questions coming in. So particularly at COP29, we saw how the emphasis was placed on human development and the fact that education, along with health, jobs and just transition, and children and youth topics, these related topics around human development, should create and connect together to create synergies, breaking the silos and making sure that we are mainstreaming human development in climate action. And of course, education takes a key role in making sure that everybody is climate ready, and teachers and educators' role in creating education systems enabling this climate education forward would be the key way to take this human development agenda to the next step. So getting every teacher ready and having the enabling environment, such as the issues of education policies, budget, as well as assessment, as we will look into further with Mario later on this conversation, were a very important part of this takeaways from COP29. And we would like to see your views on some of the answers coming in. So we see the importance of teachers for the future. That's a beautiful presentation with your responses. Thank you very much. And awareness on this importance of education, importance of cooperation, empowerment, meaningful engagement, and the role of teachers highlighted, and importance of health and sustainability. So some of these questions are coming up. I see that we also have the question of partnership and making sure that partnership and community of practice is strengthened. So this is one of the key takeaways from COP29. And the biggest I see on the screen would be empowerment and skills, awareness, sustainability, and partnership. Thank you very much for your inputs. As we have these inputs coming in, I would like to now invite our panelists to share their perspectives and takeaways from COP29. So let's start with Mario. So Mario, you lead the work on the PISA assessment for transversal 21st century skills at OECD. And we had the pleasure of co-organizing a roundtable on greening education and accelerating action through climate literacy in international assessments at COP29. So for you, what are the main achievements and takeaways on greening teacher training and education systems capacities from your experience at Baku at COP29? Over to you.
Hey, thank you, everyone, for the nice introduction, and thanks everybody for joining us today. First, I must say that I'm relatively new to this community, so I very much look forward to this conversation and to learning more from you. This COP29 in Baku was my first COP experience, so lots of impressions. Like, I was quite fascinated by the level of engagement, by the number of countries participating, and the wide participation of the civil society and organization. Like, from my perspective, I'm going to speak mostly about our session at this ministerial roundtable. As one said, it was organized with UNESCO and the Green Education Partnership, but we had a session that was fully focused on the importance of assessment, and this would be my main point today. Why speaking about assessment in a conversation around teacher capacities and teacher training? Essentially because assessment play a fundamental role in driving what the teachers will focus on in their everyday work. Teachers have various level of autonomy in their profession in different countries, but they all follow guidance that they receive either from the curriculum, but mostly from the content of assessment. What gets assessment gets prioritized. Teachers have lots of competing tasks and priorities. There are more and more demands, and I've been one of the artifacts of this. Putting even more work on the shoulders of teachers. Like when we say that they should be teaching transversal competencies or social emotional learning, we're asking them to do more and more. And if the assessment don't include a component on climate change and environmental sustainability, the teacher will inevitably put a bit less focus. They might decide to spend one day, but they will not systematically try to tackle and cover all the skills that we believe are foundational for students' learning. So I would say the importance of having a new assessment of climate literacy in PISA is really about driving this kind of change. There are lots of countries that look at PISA as a model for making their own assessment reform. So we expect that some countries will pick up the idea, and they will integrate some level of assessment on climate literacy, climate change, environmental sustainability. There will be multiple names. It doesn't really matter. What it matters is that it becomes a target learning outcome for all the children at different level of education. So just a few words on what PISA will be doing, so you understand better the process. The target is PISA 2029, so we will be working over like the next 4 years. We have already started working with forming a group of experts, the international experts that are working with us on building an assessment framework. What is it? It's essentially a description of the knowledge, skills, attitudes, behavior, beliefs that the student should be developing. There is some elements of progression, so we describe what students should be able to do at different level of competencies, and then we ideate like some good assessment task to elicit evidence on where students are in their development. So I will be pleased to like lead this work, but it will be a very collaborative work. We need to work with many people, and we really welcome collaborations or from any of you, because one of the challenges of doing this work right is that inevitably even when you involve experts, we all come from our own cultural perspective, priorities, and this the overall objective of this work is that we create a global metric that really reflects priorities that are shared across the world and reflect what kind of targets that all students in different countries and cultures should be able to demonstrate. There will be opportunities to extend this work and contextualize, and also develop instruments so that that the assessment also enables like teacher professional learning. But I guess I will be speaking more about that in the next round of questions, so I will stop it now. But of course, I'm pleased to explain a little bit more about what PISA is, if you want to have more information, and the practicalities of how we are going to make this work. But essentially, the main message is that if this work moves forward, we will have like one metric and a number of indicators in PISA 2029, so the data will be available from 2030, and we can imagine setting targets, and this will be a driver, I think, of policy change at the system level, and also a source of teacher will be able to have like more easily make the argument that they need to do something about it. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mario. Indeed, I mean, before climate education and education for sustainable development had been driven by passionate teachers and educators based on their personal conviction, but now systematizing it, mainstreaming it, and making sure that it drives structural changes in education systems capacities. I think the PISA would be a great support and driver for this change. So thank you very much for your input, and we are very excited to hear about this. And now let me ask Gurpreet. Gurpreet, you participated in a COP29 climate change summer camp where you connected with 75 young teachers and youth from 35 countries around the world who were eager to drive this change, the passionate teachers across the world. So in your view, what are the main takeaways from COP29, including the summer camp, on particularly the greening of teacher training and education systems capacities, and how it contributed to driving change at local level in your school with your students? Over to you.
Okay, hi everybody. Good evening from Malaysia. So I was very lucky to be a participant at the COP29 Climate Change Summer Camp. When I went there, I think when we saw all the people who attended, one of the key things that all of us had in common was we all had the want. We knew that we wanted to make a change, we wanted to make a difference, but I think a lot of us lacked the what, the where, the how, the support that we needed. And one of my biggest takeaway from attending the COP29 Climate Change Summer Camp was I gained a lot of confidence and inspiration, because I am now suddenly not alone in this fight towards educating people about climate change. And here there are 74 others like me from all over the world, people from Africa, Malta, US, Vietnam, everybody wanting the same thing, and just having each other there really inspired me to hear people's stories, and it really built some confidence in me that, hey, I can also make a difference and make a change. I've been a teacher for the last 12 years. I come from a family that, caring for the environment, we're very eco-conscious, but as an educator, I felt I lacked the confidence. And so attending this event really, really helped me gain that confidence. The other thing that I really picked up on was the support system that I got. It's been about 3-4 months now since we came back, but all of us are still very connected to each other. There is discussions about doing inter-school discussions among our students. I teach 10 to 12-year-olds, and to get that opportunity for my students at 10 years old to speak to students from Indonesia, from India, is a big opportunity to empower them that, hey, I too at such a young age can make a difference. And so the support system that I gained was also really incredible. But one of the biggest takeaways on Slido as well, when you shared, somebody had put about system changes slowly, and I think this is something that a lot of us forget, that we expect immediate change. I was expecting immediate change as well, and there was this word that was constantly repeated to us: patience. You need patience, patience, and patience. And this is a slow process. We got to get the ball rolling, but it's you gotta just give it time and space for it to explore and expand on its own. And so, in terms of our takeaways, one of the things I would like to share was one of us from the attendees in Peru, who she works at the Amazon on the Peru side, and after going to COP29 and gaining the confidence, she actually started a conversation with the local community, and today they have now come up with a working committee to work towards sustaining the Amazon and making a change in school. And that, of course, that's at a very big level, but this is what I mean, that the inspiration, the confidence, the support system has been great. Whereas for me, because of my connections I made through COP29, I managed to take a few of my students to attend the Youth Climate Change Summit that was organized by the Wild Center in Penang in Malaysia. It was an international summit. Again, because I was empowered to do this, it felt very daunting, but I did it, and the girls had a blast. It just made a lot of difference. So although it was a very small number, but to me, it's gotten the ball rolling. The girls are now talking about how amazing it is, and my school is part of the Eco School. And when the girls attended a different workshop, they then looked at me and said, "Oh, this is what we learned at the summit." And making the connection, I could see them feeling so empowered that, hey, we know this stuff, we know what we can do, and we can make the difference. And so giving them that space for exploration has been amazing, and I really look forward to seeing what more I can do with the knowledge and connections that I've made. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you very much, Gurford. Already your energy that's beaming out of you it just delivers the message that empower teachers with confidence, inspiration, and a support system through a community of practice just changes the world. So thank you so much for your energy and passion and the amazing stories that came out of this COP29 youth camp. So very happy to hear that. Now, I would like to turn to Colin, who has attended COP29 himself and also spoke at the Ministerial Roundtable on Greening Education as a teacher representative of Education International. So in your view, particularly coming from Teachers Union, what do you think were the main achievements and takeaways regarding greening teacher training at COP29?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And thank you to both UNESCO and UNFCCC for hosting today as well. Welcome to the participants from around the world. My view, I guess, is shaped at least in part by my role in our Ontario Teachers Union. OSSTF is a union representing about 60,000 workers, 40,000 teachers, as well as 20,000 education workers in Ontario. So that certainly feeds into the perspective that I brought with me to COP. I will say that my accreditation at this COP was through our national labor body, the Canadian Labor Congress. And so while I was wearing several hats at the COP, certainly on behalf of EI and on behalf of educators, I was also sort of looking through a union lens. Gurpreet, I also very much appreciate your energy and your optimism. I will say that I maybe left COP 29 with some duality in my feelings, a bit of a different vibe maybe. I also attended COP 28 in Dubai, and so when we talk about that triumvirate of COPs and what's been trying to be built over the course of a couple of years as we head towards Brazil as well, it's hard to separate out what went on in Baku with what was laid, the groundwork that was laid in Dubai as well. I think when we talk about education systems, but more so, and I'll get into teacher training in a minute as well, and that is what I did have a chance to talk about at the COP in the Greening Education Project annual meeting. But I think when we talk about education systems, we have to think about where those education systems fit within broader government policy and within broader society as well. And so COP29 certainly reaffirmed many of the themes coming from Paris. Certainly the focus was on climate finance that ran throughout the COP, obviously, but also mitigation and adaptation, and the way that those ideas have changed over time. When we look back on 29 COPs and when we look at where global emissions are now, we understand that we are still continuing to try to develop a system in order to deal with climate change and its effects, all the while still digging a deeper hole. And I think that is a real challenge. And I think when we think about education systems on a global level, we have to reflect on what at COP29 seemed to me to be a deepening divide, I think, between the global north and the global south. We see some global north countries really retrenching and digging in, refusing to take a leadership role in climate change. And that's very concerning from an education perspective, from a resilient education system perspective, also from a just transition perspective and the kinds of jobs that our students are going to have opportunities to have in the coming decades. I think there's a real concern at this point over what the limits are of multilateralism. If I can be blunt or overly pessimistic about it, I think we have to really think about how do we equip our students to deal with a system that's very much going to be shifting as they're trying to take on climate change. What system are they going to be taking that on in? And how does that system work? Are we going to keep attending COPs? Will some of the major polluters and major funders continue to participate in the COPs? And certainly that obviously includes the United States, it includes China. What will their roles be as world leaders on both sides of the ledger, as I say, as global polluters, but also as massive economies that have the ability to make a real difference in both mitigation, adaptation, as well as technology transfer. So I think those are some of the themes that we have to think about as we look at where the education systems fit in. There's no question, as Mario said, that I think he's attesting around climate change and checking in on student literacy around climate literacy, I think is going to be a critical step. It was interesting to hear the host Minister of Education talk about where he felt his country fit in globally with respect to PISA, and then also laying out some aspirational goals of where they hope to get to. So I think there's an opportunity to use assessment for progress. With respect of teacher training, at the Greening Education Project annual meeting, I was able to talk on behalf of workers, on behalf of Education International, and I think that there are a number of elements to teacher training. One is a political commitment on behalf of countries to making a meaningful difference to climate change, starting with recognizing where they are in that continuum of polluters, funders, problem solvers. And I think countries need to be honest with where they are politically. I think when you talk about teacher training, we have to ensure that teachers have longitudinal training across all of the subject areas. Climate change is not a scientific problem anymore. It's far, far more than that. It's a social problem and really needs to be addressed as such. And so I think that when we look at teacher training, we have to ensure that we have the breadth of topics available to teachers. And we have to really make a commitment to it. And that means ongoing training time-wise for teachers that are already in the profession. We can't wait for the next generation of teachers, the next generation of students to solve this problem. Action is required now. And so we have to look at how we integrate teacher training for those already in the profession, as I say, across all of the subject areas, And I think a lot of that really comes down to sophisticated understanding of human behavior, political studies, as well as economic studies, understanding finance, climate finance, and certainly, obviously, this is age-appropriate curriculum. I come from a secondary perspective, so these are 15-year-olds up to 18-year-olds, and when we look at where we're headed towards higher education as well, we really have to take a look at that longitudinal approach to climate education. So happy to leave it there. I have a few things I'd like to add to the second question, but I appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. You made a very important overview of this political systems challenges and opportunities potentially, and how we can drive justice-driven action towards climate change, and how education systems role fits into that overall picture. So thank you very much for your comments. And I think these points that were raised by the three panelists for the first question of achievements and takeaways, for example, creating that enabling environment, as Mario mentioned, also the political commitments, as Colin just mentioned, especially making sure that actions are taken right now for in-service teacher training to be strengthened, and the inspiration and confidence and community of practice that Gurpreet talked about that helps teachers to drive the change forward. I think these are some of the key takeaways and evergreen takeaways, not only from COP29, but for all of us for the years to come. So thank you very much for your insights on this first question. Now, I invite you to go to slido.com again to delve into the second part of the question, which will be to address the question of what are the next steps to translate these achievements and takeaways that we just talked about into action. So this is now the action part, and this actually wraps nicely the whole series of conversation that we've been having on this topic throughout the year. So please go to slido.com, again, the event code or the QR code, and also please share your questions to the panelists in the Q&A function on the Zoom, or the questions and comments section of the Slido, so that we can compile and try to address them at the later part of the discussion. So the key questions now for the moment are what are the next steps to translate these observations and achievements into action after COP29. I think there are already some of the key insights coming out from the conversations and comments from the three panelists earlier. So, for example, Maria talked about how the PISA process will be taking place for the next 4 years to make sure that 2029 version takes on climate education. We talked about the in-service teacher training that is necessary, and also from Gurpreet, the importance of this community of practice and exchanges among teachers. So now I see on the screen some of the responses coming in. So reforming curriculum and key performance indicators, teaching humanity and spirituality at an early age. So having that values education in place. Need to just start doing teaching now. So thank you very much for that very energetic comment. Well curated resource platforms, lesson plans. So we need lesson plans to help the teachers to move forward, and community of practice, more collaboration, cross-border collaboration, tackling commitments, more visibility, learning, training. Yes, and also tracking the commitments and achievements, taking it forward to see where we stand and how we are going to move forward. So thank you so much for your inputs, implementation, collaboration, lesson plans, community of practice. These are some of very concrete action plans going forward. So now let us hear again from our panelists, and please, I would like to remind you to raise your questions in the Q&A boxes for the panelists as well. So now, going back to our panelists, first, Colin, and dear panelists, in the interest of time, if you can respond in 1 or 2 minutes to shorten, so that we have enough time for addressing these amazing questions that are coming in through the chat. So Colin, following your answer to the first question, so what do you think are the key areas that we can translate into action, particularly on this teacher training and education systems capacities? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I will try to be brief in my remarks. I appreciate the reminder. Thank you. I think it's critical as educators that we look at our role in promoting social dialogue and strengthening social systems. We see very differential responses around the world where human rights play a different role, where relationships, I think in the Slido, I think spirituality was mentioned. And I think obviously when we look at national approaches to human interaction, human development, we see broadly different approaches around the globe. But I think at its essence, if we talk about climate as underpinning the survival of the species, I think the interconnectedness of the species, we very much have to look at that. I think when we look at teacher recruitment and retention, we're in a global crisis there. Certainly the UN high-level panel on the teaching profession and the General Secretary's report that came out from that talks about the importance of recruiting and retaining excellent teachers around the globe. That means respecting the profession. It means fairly compensating the profession in a local context. Certainly where teachers are organized, I think there's an opportunity to push the agenda further and faster. And I think there's some onus on the organized labor community to continue to take that on. I think we have to involve educators in policy decisions around climate education. I think that's critical to involve teachers in what frontline looks like. Lesson plans was one of the biggest things and the biggest words in the Slido. And I think that goes to the idea that the concrete frontline solutions from frontline workers are absolutely part of the solution. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Colin. So these values that we need to emphasize as part of climate action, but particularly supporting teachers as professions. I think the lack of teachers and, as you said, the recruitment, but also the retention and creating environment for teachers to be empowered to take these kind of topics into their classrooms. I think that's a critical point that you raised. So thank you very much for that. So Gurpreet, next over to you. So you mentioned earlier about the kind of inspiration and confidence that you were able to gain from this COP29 process, in particular the summer camp. So for you as a teacher, what are the next steps to translate this into action?
Thank you very much. So for me, I think right now I want to look at a school level and a community level on how I can make this difference. And one of the first steps that I have already taken is to start the conversation. Start having conversations with students about what is climate change, what do they understand. We speak Bahasa Malaysia or Malay language. And so even if they get to understand the knowledge on climate change in our local language, that's already a big win. And slowly then use English to get them talking at a global level. But starting conversations is one. The next thing is to start having more connections, attending more workshops, attending more connections with global partners and global friends around. Again, to start building this community among the students as well, to show that they have this opportunity outside there to start something. And the other thing would be to all teachers out there and to everybody here, I think the one takeaway that I would like all of you to take is to be honest with yourself of what you want and what you can do and what are you looking for. I was very honest when I went to COP saying, I want to do this, but I don't know how to do this. And when I was honest, I had this huge pour of knowledge coming because everybody was willing to share. So be honest so that you inspire your own self before you can empower the people around you and the community around you. Because I'm just going to leave it one quote, because an ordinary day for a teacher could be a magical one for your students. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Gurpreet. I see a lot of hearts going up on the screen in reaction to your comments. So thank you very much for bringing that. And yes, indeed, I mean, ourselves and keeping the hope and positivity and honesty around ourselves in this time of crisis, I think it's so important. So thank you very much for that. And then now I turn to Mario. So Mario, you had that overall systems perspective on how to drive change in education systems to accelerate climate action. So for you, what are the steps that can be taken to turn this into concrete action plans?
Yes, thanks, Juan. Essentially, what we can contribute from the PISA angle is to engage different education system. Like we work with over 90 countries around the world to engage them in a conversation around this, around the way to practical ways they can embed climate education into the different curriculum and assessment. So one thing would be, to use like the PISA machine in terms of like the direct engagement of education ministries around the world in this, to engage them in this conversation, connect it to the next COP, so that whatever we develop like gets visible and engage even more countries and more policymakers in the conversation. There are like practical things that we will be doing that will generate conversation, questions, and possibly some like solutions. One of the main ideas of this assessment is like that we are trying to push for is really the interdisciplinarity and the need to engage teachers from different subjects in the matter, to pass the message to the teacher that this is not just a priority of science teachers, but it's really like a mission for everybody. So what we are trying to do is to embed climate change education across all the different domains of PISA. So it's not just the science assessment as we used to do in the past, but also in mathematics, in reading, in media, because as Colin said, there is a lot to do beyond like knowing the climate science, and knowledge of climate science and what the origins of climate change, and all that doesn't necessarily transform students in terms of agency. That ultimately, what do we want? Of course, we want that they understand what climate change it is, that climate change is happening. That would already be a big achievement. But we really want to make a transformation. We want to build a next generation that will push the countries to take, especially the developed countries or the big economies that Colin was speaking about, that push like the policymakers to take the difficult decisions and to drive transformation. Like by forming students, we are forming the next generation of voters, and this is like one of the main channels and responsibilities that we have as from my side as somebody that speaks to policymakers, but from your side like as people that speak directly to the students. My last point is that from my experience, I've been writing frameworks about all these important competencies in the last 8 years. What I've seen is that frameworks alone don't help teachers only to some extent, but not too much, because frameworks tend to be really like there's a lot of rhetoric, a lot of difficult content into that. Teachers really need, as you put in the Slido, really need concrete lesson plans, idea, material, curated resources. So part of this initiative on PISA would be to work with several partners around the world. We are like building a very large coalition starting from the JEP to build an international repository of quality resources for formative assessment and for learning. These resources will be free. They will be translated in multiple languages. Of course, like it takes a lot of work to create good quality resources. But what I've seen in other projects is that if we, as international organization, we can really play a good role in just like assembling good ideas, good material, making it available, developing the technology so that teachers can more easily use in the classroom without any judgment. They can decide what to use. They take what they want. It just simplifies their work. And so this will be part of what we will be doing in the next 2-3 years to foster change. Thanks, Juan.
Thank you very much, Mario. And indeed, I mean, Greening Education Partnership and the work, the global community around climate education will be very happy to engage in this development process. And I saw one of the comments in the chat asking about the countries outside of the PISA countries. And of course, these kind of initiative led by one of the most prominent learning assessment such as PISA would hopefully drive systems change to reflect also at the national level for reflecting climate education in learning assessments. So I hope that what you have mentioned will be taken into concrete action, and we hope we can collaborate more on this. So thank you very much. So now I have a few questions that we have picked up out of many questions that have come in through the chat. So please allow me to first pose the first question to Colin. There's a question to you about how do we talk to a 16-year-old about systems, these imbalance, the justice issue, the climate activism from your experience, and what are the resources that you may wish to share from your experience as a teacher in Canada? If you could, for everybody for this quick Q&A, if you could briefly share your points in 1 or 2 minutes, that would be great. Thank you very much. Over to you, Colin.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. A couple of things I want to touch on if I can. I think at that age, and I have 3 kids of my own who are all teenagers as well, so I see a little bit in the house as well. I think we have to understand that the kids, students generally are quite anxious about this, and I think that creates a certain learning condition for them. They have more or less understanding of the issue. So I think when we're talking to 16-year-olds, I think we have to sort of assess and acknowledge that anxiety and equip students to deal with some of that anxiety. When we talk about systems, a lot of their thinking is shaped obviously by media and social media. So I think that when we talk about media literacy training, the impacts of AI on information and misinformation, I think that's an age-appropriate lesson for a mid-teenager to be able to start to think about how can they critically approach information around climate change, and how can they access accurate information in order to make change. I think the other piece, and I think it's important for high school age students, for all youth really, is that, and you've talked about the connection, Gurpreet especially, but some of the commenters as well, when we connect around the planet, there's incredible power in people and in building knowledge and in building understanding. And so I think that increasingly youth around the globe need to understand they're not working in isolation from themselves. They absolutely have the ability to impact government policy and to make imminent changes on this topic. So I think those 3 pieces, one is the climate anxiety piece. The other is cutting through some of the noise and misinformation and making sure they have a clear understanding of the issue from where they're situated in the globe. And then as well, empowering those folks to really not wait for someone else, because it's them and it's now, and then they can be part of the change by plugging into other youth around the globe and other resources around the globe.
Thank you very much, Colin. So in addressing eco-anxiety, misinformation, and making sure that young people are empowered, for example, through action-based learning in schools, I think that would be critical for addressing this. So thank you very much for addressing that question. Next question, a quick one, I think, to Mario. How do you see teachers being involved in this PISA process?
Yes, teachers are really involved with it, but they are very much affected by the PISA process. So we are trying to change that. Part of the collaboration that we are trying to do with UNESCO and with the Greening Education Partnership would be to provide opportunity for a wide consultation, early drafts of the framework. So we don't expect to finalize anything by next year, but there will be we will be organizing together consultation, and we will be seeking feedback from everybody, all of you that are engaged in this important fight, to make sure that the framework speaks to you and tells you about the real priorities, what you're really trying to do. For example, in terms of mobilizing, changing the perspectives of your students. So if you see that, for example, that we are doing something that is a bit too much knowledge focus, then it's really your role to come up and say, no, it's at the core of the assessment should really be some social and emotional transformation and this sense of agency. And when we create this idea of that are mapping to the framework, it's also a way of testing out ideas, testing out activities. We want that what we put in the PISA test, it also becomes a model of good learning, not just an instrument of accountability, but it also like an inspiration for learning. So this, whatever we develop for this repository, and it will not just be development, we will be mostly sourcing from what already exists, curate it, and connecting to the international framework. And we will need help from different communities to connect with national curricula to make it more easily usable by the teacher. But yes, there are lots of opportunities for you to give us feedback. We have an email. I have a team of people that we really learn a lot from direct conversation and direct inputs from the teacher, and it would be our personal commitment to respond to whatever message and input you give us.
Thank you very much, Mario. Indeed, so for those of you who are teachers and interested in getting involved, Mario has shared in the chat the relevant links as well. And of course, the Greening Education Partnership Working Group 3 on teacher training will be collaborating with OECD on this kind of consultations to make sure that teachers are involved in this process. So thank you very much, Mario, for that comment. And last question goes to Gurpreet. What can governments do to better support teachers like yourselves in making sure that climate education gets into the classrooms?
Thank you very much for your question. So in the last 4 months, as I've started getting involved, one of the biggest roadblocks that I've had is money. Money talks, money matters. And I think one of the big things that the governments can do to help support teachers is by maybe offering a grant, come up with proposals. We as teachers come up with proposals of our action plan of what we want to do, and we have access to these grants to run this project. Now, the money could be used for simple things like organizing a school level competition, creating materials, getting kids to start this conversation, and it really matters to have some amount of money. Currently, I'm using my own resources and looking at my friends and family to help support me in my mission. But if I had access to some grants, that would be fantastic. The second thing would be to start investing in a lot of teacher training, empowering teachers, and coming up with resources. Like, I come from Malaysia, and if I had more access to the local Malay language materials in connection to climate change, that would be great to get conversations starting with my students. And the other thing would be to start empowering teachers from the teacher training level itself, so that by the time they come into the service, they have this understanding on climate change, and then they can slowly start getting students to be climate ready and start conversations instead of starting off as they are starting their career as teachers. So that is my 3 takes on what governments can do better.
Thank you so much, Gurpreet. I see that these are very, very important points that you raised out. And now I have one last quick question to all 3 of you before we wrap up. The question is how, looking ahead, COP30 in Brazil next year in Belém will be another important milestone. So in your view, what should future COPs prioritize to better support teachers in climate education? So one quick short response from each of you would be much appreciated. Maybe we could start this time with Gurpreet, and then Colin, then Mario, please.
Sure. Maybe have more teacher representatives at COP. Invite me to go to COP and talk to other teachers and empower and inspire people. So I think my one thing would be to get more teachers to attend COP so that they have a better understanding of that, so that we can implement it at the root level.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Colin?
Yeah, I'm hoping that as we move towards Brazil, we see civil society really engaging with COP30. And I think there's lots of opportunities for teachers and students to do that, whether they're local to the COP, but certainly all around the planet as well. We've seen that in previous COPs, I would say prior to Dubai, certainly in Glasgow, we saw significant involvement of civil society. And I think that's going to be critical. Climate change is a human rights issue and needs to be addressed as such. Of course, it's got scientific underpinnings, but we absolutely have to be taking a rights-based approach to climate change. It affects groups of people very, very differently. So that's my biggest thing. I would implore those involved in education to get involved and get your students involved as well.
Thank you very much. That's a very important point. Again, now, Mario, please.
Yes, I'm a bit biased. Like I would say, like, to facilitate what I do, we say the resources. I would really like to have a lot of teachers like coming up together with some group facilitators and engaging in like a 2-day hackathon to develop resources together. And then this will give us like a good model of what quality learning is for you. And then we can use this material for classroom-based work, but also for teacher training. So this is more of an hope. I don't know if we can put this up, but we'll be trying.
Thank you very much, Mario. Thank you once again, Mario, Gurpreet, and Colin, for your inputs and your amazing insights. I think we had so much interaction on the chat, and as well as also the nice little thumbs up and hearts going around on the screen. So thank you so much for your inputs. Particularly, I think we've touched on the enabling environments to support teachers and support climate education as a whole, as a education systems capacities, making sure that teachers are supported with the resources, materials, but also the kind of community of practice that helps to empower them to take action, and the right kind of in-service training that is needed, and also, of course, supporting teachers as a profession as an overall through particularly this interdisciplinary approach for all teachers to have climate ready materials and resources to take forward. So thank you so much for these amazing inputs. And now today was the last session of the third season of the UNESCO-UNFCCC Webinar Series on Climate Education for Social Transformation. And this series is also delivered as part of the Action for Climate Empowerment Hub, supported by the German regional government of North Rhine-Westphalia. Today's discussion will be published as video recordings, which will be made available on UNFCCC ACE Hub and UNESCO's webinar page. And we will be issuing, as usual, the certificate to those who have attended at least half of the webinars, that is to say at least 3 out of the 6 webinars of this year's series. So please make your request by completing the form on the link in the chat, or you can also scan the QR code on the screen to access this form. And I would like to thank all participants, speakers that have been with us throughout this series. And as you can see on the slide, also this third season of the webinars has been a great success in terms of number of participants, and recordings are now also used in some schools as teaching materials. So you can see over 4,000 people already engaged, and this number usually goes up as the year goes. So this third season will be followed by a fourth season next year, focusing on greening communities on the road to COP30 in Brazil, Belém. And we hope that COP30 in Brazil will be also an opportunity to take a global stock of the achievements done around the 4 areas of greening schools, communities, curriculum, and teacher training and education systems capacities. So more details on the next steps in the next season will be shared soon through UNESCO and UNFCCC websites and channels. So with this, I would like to thank you and wish you a warm and happy end of the year, and hope to see you in 2025. So thank you very much for all your time and attention. And once again, thanks to the panelists for this great conversation. Thank you very much and have a good day.